To the Middle East, and Palestinian health authorities say at least 10 people have been killed in separate Israeli strikes in Gaza. The strikes hit Gaza City in the north and Nuseirat in central Gaza. The toll includes 5 journalists from the Al-Quds television network, which is affiliated with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad militant group. They were killed when their vehicle was hit outside a hospital. The Israeli military says it targeted the group's militants at the Nuseirat refugee camp. I spoke earlier with our correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz in Jerusalem. I began by asking him about those airstrikes in Gaza.
Yeah, we are talking about 2 different strikes, one in Gaza City that killed at least 5 people, and then local media reports about 5 journalists being killed in a refugee camp in central Gaza. They were parked outside a hospital, and eyewitnesses say that their vehicle clearly showed the word press. The Israeli side said that it was a precise attack, and as usual, all measures are taken to mitigate the risk of harming civilians. However, it's obviously not the first type of this kind of incident. International Journalists Association say that at least 150 journalists have been killed since the beginning of the war.
Now, we're also hearing about an Israeli raid in the West Bank, Jan-Philipp, that left at least 8 people dead. What happened there?
Yeah, there were 2 raids in refugee camps in the northern part of the West Bank. At least 8 Palestinians were killed, 2 women. The Israeli military said it was a counter-terrorism operation, but the situation seems to have escalated when an improvised explosive device hit an Israeli military vehicle and seriously injured one of their commanders. So this seems to be one more incident in the West Bank. There have been a lot of violent clashes recently, and observers fear that the situation in the West Bank could escalate further.
Meanwhile, talks aimed at ending the hostilities and getting the hostages released have been ongoing in the Qatari capital, Doha. Where do things stand now, Jan-Philipp?
As many times before, Hamas and the Israeli government accuse each other of disrupting the negotiations. Hamas says that Israel suddenly comes up with new conditions. The office of Prime Minister Netanyahu says that, as usual, the terrorist group lies and is breaking agreements that have already been agreed on. Just a few days ago, people were cautiously optimistic. There were already concrete talks of the number and names of hostages and prisoners to be released. But at the moment, it seems as if the negotiations are getting much more difficult again. And one of the big questions remains, that is the military presence, or the Israeli military presence in Gaza after a possible ceasefire.
Jan-Philipp, thank you very much. That was our correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz in Jerusalem. Well, Israel's government has approved plans to double the population of Israeli settlers in the occupied Golan Heights. That's an area of Syria that Israel unilaterally annexed in 1981. The government's move comes shortly after the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. The Israeli army has also advanced into Golan's demilitarized buffer zone inside Syria and launched hundreds of airstrikes on Syrian military targets. DW correspondent Emily Gordine reports from Ein Zivan in the occupied Golan Heights.
It's breakfast time at Pelter Winery in the occupied Golan Heights. Tal Pelter and his team have been up since 7 o'clock, filling hundreds of bottles of wine. Just a few weeks ago, they were only 400 meters away from the Syrian border. But since the fall of the Assad regime, that distance has grown.
On our region here, it moved, let's say, 5 kilometers.
Israel's military has seized the UN buffer zone that used to serve as the de facto border with Syria, capturing several Syrian military posts inside the country and launching hundreds of airstrikes on weapons stockpiles, all to avoid chaos spilling over into Israel, according to Israel's Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu has also approved a plan to expand settlements in the area, though some analysts are skeptical.
I don't think it's realistic. This is not the time when normal Israelis would move to the Golan, which became a problematic area, given what's on the other side of the border potentially. And I think this was a statement made by Mr. Netanyahu for domestic purposes. He also said that Israel will always stay on the Golan, but I can tell you that twice, once in 1998 and then again in 2010, 2011, in negotiating with Syria, first with Hafez and then with Bashar, he extended or conveyed a willingness to withdraw from the Golan in the context of a peace agreement.
The occupied Golan Heights were annexed by Israel in 1981, even though most countries around the world condemned the move and don't recognize it as Israeli territory. Living here has become normal. And for the residents in this village, the military's presence is welcomed. The memories of the Hamas-led terror attacks on October 7 last year are still fresh in the mind.
Let's say that up until the last few weeks, there was always the fear that something like this could happen here as well. And because the border here is a very, very long border here in the Golan, so everybody's very tense. And now people are a bit more relaxed of what's happening.
The new Syrian government has already lodged a complaint with the UN Security Council about Israeli advances into Syrian territory. But Netanyahu has made clear that Israel plans on staying here for some time, a decision that could fuel tensions in the future.